Ah, wow, you scared the crap out of me. I've been wanting to do that all semester. It's so stupid. Anyway, so I've given you guys a lot to do. You got your peer review exercise. You got your drafts that are now needing to be submitted to the discussion forum as opposed to a Dropbox. We'll start doing Dropboxes again maybe next week to get more grades. But I thought for today, let's not add on to the list of things you have to do. Let's take a break from that. And let's instead focus on a little bit of a writing tip. Now, writing tips are one of my favorite things to do because when it actually gets down into like the nuts and bolts of writing instruction, you want to teach people to do it better, right? Oftentimes, my classes, especially in online, are built around me getting you to do particular tasks and writing in a certain way to emphasize certain skills. But all I really want to do today is just, give you some interesting advice. Now, a lot of the time, one of the problems I encounter, especially in the classes that are a higher level, like my literature classes, is how do we fill up the page limit? A lot of students have a great amount of trouble getting to the required page limit. And this is something I've thought a long time about because as someone who is a writer, that's not really a problem for me. And so sometimes you run into these issues where it's like, you're teaching, but it's hard to understand why people have that problem because it's just so natural for me to sit down and write junk, right? I can write junk, no problem. And that's one of the things that training in writing and in English helps you do is basically bullcrap your way through stuff. I can always produce lots and lots of writing and lots of content virtually effortlessly. So what are the things that I do to make that easier for myself? Sometimes it's hard for me to actually answer that question because it's hard to analyze your own behavior, right? Because it comes naturally. But I think I have some advice for you that might help you fill that page up just a little bit more. And it has to do with your research. And this is just a really good habit to get into when you're dealing with your research. So the first thing I want to talk about is something called a data point. Data points are bits of information that you get from the research that you're doing, whether it's from Galileo or CNN or Fox News or Billy Bob's Moonshine Recipes and Civil War Facts. Those data points are the things you're going to lock on to, right? Now, a lot of times students wonder, when do I know if I need to cite something or not? The general rule is if you didn't come up with it, you need to put a citation in there for it, right? And a citation can be an extremely simple thing. It can be mentioning where the source came from. And this mostly applies to online sources. If you get something from a book, you need to tell me the author and the title of that book. And there's a little bit more complexity in that. I don't want to go too far into that right now. But if it's an online source, you can just simply mention where you got it from. That's a good idea. Students often come into the whole research conversation. And I know I'm talking a lot about research, but trust me, this is going to help you expand your paper in a minute. Students come into the conversation about research writing, and they often have this really weird instinct that they're like, I need to bury my source. I need to integrate my source into my own voice, and then I need to kind of hide the fact that it's a source, like in the citation that comes at the end of the sentence. I don't know why we do that. It's really strange to me. If you're like an academic writer and you want to emphasize your point as opposed to the source that you're getting the information from, I can kind of see that working. But overall, it's just a weird tactic. Why not tell me where the source came from? Why not tell me who wrote it? And like basically give me information about that source before you use it. At the very least, you're getting more work from your sources, right? If you tell me about those sources, that's more stuff on the page. And for me as a reader, I like knowing where I can go to find more information about something. Research, too often students, too much coffee. Too often students treat research as something that they're like trying to check off a box that they're required to do, right? But the real reason we do research is because it makes you look informed. It says to your reader, I have done my homework and I have the right to participate in this conversation. And I know enough about what's going on in this area that you can at least trust my opinion. That's the real value of research, not just because you're putting it in there because you're supposed to put it in there, but because it communicates something to the reader. It says, okay, this person actually put work into developing their opinions and their insights. So why would you not let the source come out in the writing? So whenever you have a data point, you've got information that's not yours you want to share. It basically is anything that's not yours, right? You get the idea from somewhere else. And here's a little trick. If you are discussing numbers or dates, which is technically a number, if you're discussing numbers at all, statistics, calculations, dates, you really should tell me where that came from, because more than likely you didn't go out there and find that yourself. You got that from somewhere else. As soon as there's a number in your writing, I'm going to laser focus in on that and make sure there's a citation there, because it's an issue. At that point, it's not necessarily plagiarism yet. Plagiarism is, for me, when you take a chunk of somebody else's writing, pass it off as your own. If you give a data point and don't properly cite it, that's mismanaging a source, right? And that's, don't get me wrong, that's going to hurt you. That's going to significantly affect your grade. But I don't call that plagiarism, because it could simply be like a careless mistake, right? So in any case, you got your data point. You got something you want to share. What's the proper way of treating that data point? We communicate data points in two ways. You can either quote the data point, which would be delivering the author's words verbatim, word for word. Now, when you use a quote, obviously you use quotation marks around whatever it is that is supposed to be verbatim. Very bad idea to try to change what's in those quotation marks true. You want to include it in its entirety. You don't want to change it. There are some situations where you can modify what's going on in a quote using brackets in order to make it match the flow of your writing. Again, for English 1101, I would say don't worry about that. Treat the quote in its entirety, block quote if you need it, but quotes are valuable, right? They show that you're taking this section, these few sentences, and you're putting it in your paper. Now, you can also paraphrase. A lot of students are afraid of paraphrasing. That's when you take someone else's data point, whether it be statistics or an argument or an observation, and instead of putting quotation marks around it, you're rephrasing it in your own words. Now, I will say this. If I'm writing something that's research-oriented, I'm much more likely to paraphrase something than I am to quote it. Quoting is something you do for really, really precise stuff. Meaning, I want you to see the language here, and I want you to see the exact thing that this person is saying because it's important. There are situations where quoting is really necessary because you want to read the text that closely. But for most students in English 1101, I'm not trying to be derogatory, right? When I say students in English 1101, I find it to be important to say to you guys, here's how we make this easier. Paraphrasing makes a lot more sense. It's quicker, and in my opinion, you can get more material out of a nice long paraphrase. Students are afraid of paraphrasing usually because they feel like, again, they're plagiarizing. You're not plagiarizing if you put it in your own words, as long as you tell me where it came from. And this can come in the most simple of terms. Like, let's say we are quoting Farthead in the New York Times. According to Farthead, I'm sorry, I'm supposed to be professional, but this week it's really hard to be professional. According to Mr. Farthead, in this article in the New York Times, we should expect to face massive volcanoes erupting underneath Brunswick. I don't know. You get the point here, right? As long as I tell the reader where the information is coming from, I've protected myself from accusations of plagiarism because they know where this idea is coming from. I would very much recommend play with the paraphrasing first because it's more natural and you're going to get more mileage out of it. Again, look at what I'm valuing here. Correctness is not the most important thing to me as much as it is generating the content. It's that much of a problem for most students. This research paper is supposed to be 6 pages. That can be quite a lot for English 1101 students. But if you're treating your data points in this way with paraphrasing, you might be able to dig more out of it. Now, to round this out, I want to talk a little bit about the paragraph. I almost had a mutiny in another class the other day because I told them, how long is a developed paragraph? For me, as an English instructor, you really should be shooting for an average of about 10 sentences per paragraph. And there's several reasons for that. 10 sentences per paragraph. I've probably actually lectured you on this before, but I'm doing it again real quick because it's valuable. 10 sentences per paragraph is going to give you a great deal of development if you can keep your paragraphs laser focused on one issue. And this is where the gift of the gab, the gift of bullcrapping your way through a subject, can become very valuable. If you can break your writing down into 10 sentence paragraphs and you move from one idea to the next, all of a sudden it gets much easier to fill up a 6, 10, 57 page paper, because you can kind of map it out a little bit easier because you know the goal that you're looking for. And you have nice, meaty units that you're building off of in order to fill up these pages. Now, here's where we bring it all together. And normally I have a whole bunch of visual aids in order to do this, but I don't think I need them. You have a 10-sentence paragraph. On average, how many quotes or paraphrases or data points should you work with in a paragraph? The most logical thing to do in this instance is to only use one data point, whether it's quoted, whether it's paraphrased. Now, this is not to say that using more than one quote or paraphrase data point is wrong. It's not wrong, but you're making it a lot harder for yourself, and you're not really using your sources in a way that you're going to get a lot of traction out of them. There are really good writers who can throw out a bunch of quotes and tie them all together and make it work really well. English 1101 students aren't usually at that level, right? And again, you're making it harder for yourself to do that. Now, how do we take a single data point and drag a 10 sentence paragraph out of it? It's actually a lot easier if you treat the paragraph well, if you treat the data point well. One, the quote or the paraphrase needs to go in the middle of the paragraph, as close to the middle as you can possibly get it. If you put it in the middle, you're going to get more space out of it. If the paraphrase of the quote is located in the middle of the paragraph, you can use the beginning of the paragraph to introduce the data point. Tell me where it came from, who wrote it, why it's important. Well, actually hold off on why it's important. Introduce it to me and prepare me for it. Tell me what to look for. You could drag out 3 or 4 sentences just introducing it. Again, that gets us closer to the 10. We get to the middle of the paragraph, we get the substance of the data point. What do you do at the end of the paragraph? You analyze it. To analyze a data point, whether it be a quote or a paraphrase, is actually a very easy thing to do. You've introduced it, you've delivered the substance. Now all you have to do is step back and answer the question, why is this important? Interpret. Don't summarize. A lot of students try to summarize the quote, which doesn't make a lot of sense, because if you did this well, the paraphrase or the quote should do the job of delivering the information. There's no reason for you to re-deliver the information. What you want to do is you want to put it into the context of your argument. How does this data point further your own idea, right? How does it contribute to the theme or the argument of your paper? The why is this important can really, really work in order to properly dissect a data point. Now, again, if you devote 4 sentences to that, you've gotten really close to that 10-sentence paragraph. And again, imagine all the research you're doing. If you start taking these quotes, these paraphrases, all of a sudden you got 3 or 4 10-sentence paragraphs all based off of it. You've taken up a huge chunk of space in your writing. You've created a lot of material. Once you've created all that material, you can then step back and supplement it with your own observations in order to round it out. Writing makes much, much more sense when you compartmentalize it. when you think about it in terms of, I'm going to tackle this section, and then I'm going to move on to this section, and then I'm going to work on this section, and you tie all these things together in order to make the greater whole. One of the biggest mistakes that students make when they're writing is they sit down the night before something's due and they try to hammer the whole thing out in one shot. You are going to give yourself an aneurysm if you do that. You've got to compartmentalize, and you got to figure out your strategy before you sit down to write, and you need to write it in pieces that then form together like a jigsaw puzzle. That's more work. But it, in my opinion, ensures a better product and a lot less fear, right? If you have those little bits linking together, and if you've produced all this stuff that can then work to create this Voltron paper, it's more than likely going to be a better behaved unit. It's going to have structure, it's going to have organization, and it's just going to look informed, and it's going to have development and detail to it. Once you master the ability to write according to the structure of the paragraphs, you can kind of bounce around on it and write it from different sides, which will let you kind of discover things a little bit as you write the paper, and you'll manage your time better. You're going to have a much better idea of how this thing should develop, rather than sitting down at the computer and trying to visualize 6 to 10 to 57 pages of material and cranking it all out in one go. That's a very unpleasant thing to do. You want to take it in actual logical steps. Now, in order to get an A on this paper, I want you to try out this, I call it research format. I want you to try out this way to treat your quotes and your paraphrases. Locate them in the middle of the paragraph, and then introduce it and analyze it towards the end. Not only are you just going to have a better paragraph, but I'm going to give you, that's what I'm looking for. That's the simple gist of it. You're going to do well because you're playing with this format that I've introduced you to, but your paper is going to be better, right? So I want you guys to remember this. No real assignment for today. I would like for you guys to take a break. Although, if you're really ambitious, you could always go into the discussion forum and write an example of a research format paragraph and just put it in there, and I'd give you bonus points for it. But it's not required. I want you guys just to work on your drafts. That was a fun lesson. I took up a lot of time with that. How are y'all? This election, huh? Oh, man, it is. I just want it to be over so I can do something else besides follow election numbers that just straight up don't seem to change ever. Oh my goodness. Anyway, that's all for today. You guys have a great weekend.